You think you're helping. You think you're being kind. You think you're loving someone through their wounds. But what if I told you? You're actually being used. Not maliciously, not with evil intent, but in a deeper, more dangerous way, unconsciously. Every time you silence your truth to keep the peace. Every time you walk on eggshells to avoid triggering someone's pain. Every time you feel exhausted after a conversation that seemed normal, you're not supporting a person. You're absorbing a pattern. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But he didn't just mean your own unconscious. He meant the unconscious of those closest to you. Because unintegrated trauma has gravity, and if you're the empathetic one, you will be pulled into its orbit until you forget what freedom even feels like. This video is not about blaming others. It's about waking up. You'll learn how unconscious manipulation disguises itself as love. You'll understand why emotional dependency isn't connection, it's control. And most importantly, you'll see how your empathy, your greatest gift, can also become your greatest curse. If you've ever felt like you're slowly disappearing inside a relationship that looks peaceful on the outside but drains your soul every day, this is for you. Stay until the end. What you'll discover could finally set you free from pain that was never yours to carry. Ready? Let's begin. You've probably met someone like this. They're soft-spoken, kind, and maybe even a little fragile. But after a while, being around them feels like walking through fog, emotionally drained, mentally confused, spiritually tight. What you're feeling isn't random. It's the gravitational pull of their unhealed shadow. Carl Jung warned us, repressed emotions don't vanish. They operate from the basement of the psyche. And some people become so identified with their wounds that their very presence becomes a silent request. Carry what I can't face. It doesn't look like manipulation. There are no lies, no screams, no dramatic scenes. Just a slow erosion of your own center, replaced by the weight of someone else's emotional history. This isn't about villainy. The unconscious manipulator doesn't wake up plotting your collapse. They're not evil. They're overwhelmed. Somewhere in their past, love was conditional. Emotions weren't safe. Vulnerability was a risk. So they learned to survive through fusion. If you love me, you'll absorb me. Their unconscious manipulation isn't strategy. It's instinct. They're not using you. They're reenacting a trauma. And like actors in a play they don't remember auditioning for, they cast others into roles. The rescuer, the listener, the emotional sponge. You didn't sign up for this, but here you are, slowly losing yourself in the name of empathy, wondering why your nervous system feels like it's under siege. Here's the twisted truth. The more emotionally aware you are, the more attractive you become to people like this. If you're the strong one, the one who reads emotions in the room before others enter, you're gold, because they won't have to speak their pain. You'll feel it, you'll name it, you'll fix it, and slowly, invisibly, you'll bend. You'll silence your own needs. You'll edit your truth. You'll start anticipating their storms so you can protect both of you. But here's the problem. They're not responding to you. They're reacting to ghosts. And no matter how much love you offer, you will never exercise what they refuse to confront. In low-income communities, this pattern shows up everywhere. A single mother guilt trips her adult son for moving out. A friend becomes cold every time you mention your success. A partner sulks in silence until you apologize for things you didn't do. These aren't conscious acts of harm. They're trauma responses disguised as relationships. And when survival has always depended on emotional control, love turns into a tool. Guilt becomes the currency. Silence becomes the weapon. Jung called this a complex, an unconscious cluster of emotions, memories, and beliefs that hijack behavior. When left unchecked, it becomes identity distortion. The person no longer relates. They manipulate, without even knowing. But what does this mean for you? It means that your kindness can be used as a doorway, that your desire to help can make you a vessel. You're not doing anything wrong. In fact, that's the danger. You're doing everything right. You're showing up. You're listening. You're sacrificing. But in this dynamic, those virtues become liabilities. The unconscious manipulator doesn't need support. They need awakening. And every time you step in to regulate their pain, you delay that awakening. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But sometimes it directs their life through yours, and calls it love." Imagine your life like a house. Every time you carry someone's shadow, you give them a room. At first, it's small. Just a corner of your time, your attention. But over time, they expand. Their needs take over your living room. Their moods shape your schedule. Their fears decorate your walls. You think you're being generous, but you're actually being erased. This is not compassion, it's collapse. And the longer it continues, the more you confuse the house for a home. You stop inviting others in. You stop opening windows. You live inside their storm, thinking it's your sky. And that, Jung would say, is how the psyche suffocates in silence. So what keeps people stuck here? Hope. You remember the moments of connection, the rare smiles, the "I don't know what I'd do without you." You tell yourself they'll change, that your love will finally reach them. But this is where the trap tightens. Because this isn't a relationship, it's an orbit. You're not on solid ground, you're spinning around their pain. And no matter how fast you spin, you can't anchor someone who has no ground inside themselves. They have to find it, but they never will, if you keep cushioning the fall. As painful as it sounds, sometimes real love means letting people hit the ground they've been avoiding. And this is where the real crisis begins, when you start realizing that helping them hurts you, that staying soft is costing your strength, that silence has become your second language. But how do you leave without guilt? How do you detach from someone who isn't bad, just broken? This is the edge most never cross. And yet, it's the only way forward. Because until the unconscious manipulator meets their own storm face to face, they will keep using others as umbrellas. And the more empathetic you are, the more soaked you'll get. The next chapter, it takes us deeper, into the life of those who carry pain behind a smile, the ones who wear the perfect mask. At first, it feels noble. You're the one who listens deeply, who holds space, who senses shifts in tone before a word is spoken. You take pride in your empathy, your ability to care when others can't. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that strength becomes a leash. You're not just caring anymore, you're managing. You monitor their moods, decode their silences, adjust your truth to protect their fragility. And still, something always feels off. Carl Jung warned, the unconscious manipulator doesn't need a partner. They need a mirror. But instead of reflection, they seek regulation. And you, the empathetic one, become the thermostat for a temperature you didn't create. This is where emotional dependency hides in plain sight. Not in words, but in dynamics. They sigh, you ask what's wrong. They withdraw, you move closer. They sulk, you apologize, without knowing what you did. It feels like intimacy, but it's enmeshment. Your nervous system stays on high alert, trying to maintain harmony that was never your job to begin with. This is not love. It's emotional labor disguised as connection. And the tragedy is this: the more you give, the more invisible you become. You shrink so they can stabilize. You stay calm so they can unravel. You silence yourself in the name of peace, but lose your inner voice along the way. In working-class homes, especially where survival is a daily negotiation, this pattern gets embedded early. A child becomes the emotional support for a depressed parent. A sibling learns to avoid conflict at all costs. A partner sacrifices personal goals just to keep the family from falling apart. Empathy in these environments isn't a virtue, it's a necessity. But when that pattern continues into adulthood, it becomes a silent prison. You're not helping anymore, you're enabling. And the worst part? You can't even tell where your emotions end and theirs begin. You've fused so deeply that your identity now bends around their pain. Jung described this as the animus possession, when the inner emotional life overtakes the ego as sense of self. The caretaker becomes consumed by the emotional reality of the other. And here's the paradox. The more attuned you are, the more likely you are to be manipulated, not out of malice, but out of mirroring. The unconscious manipulator isn't trying to fool you. They're trying to stabilize themselves through you. But your empathy is not a cure. It's a temporary fix. And if you keep offering bandages for someone else's internal bleeding, you'll both end up drained. And still, the wound will remain untouched. You start noticing it in your body first. Constant fatigue, anxiety without cause. Tightness in your chest that only loosens when they're okay. You assume it's stress, maybe overwork. But the real culprit is emotional overload. You're carrying more than your share, and your nervous system knows it. This isn't just spiritual or psychological, it's biological. Your brain has been rewired to prioritize their needs over yours. You've become the wounded healer, someone who tends to others while ignoring their own injuries. And in doing so, you start forgetting what your needs even were in the first place. There's a brutal honesty here that most people avoid. Sometimes empathy is a mask for control. Not in the manipulator, but in the caretaker. Because as long as you're needed, you feel worthy. As long as you're fixing, you feel in control. But that's not love. It's codependency. You've mistaken emotional exhaustion for purpose. You've mistaken survival for connection. And every time you overfunction for someone unwilling to face their own pain, you rob them of the opportunity to grow. Jung would call this interference with individuation, the act of interrupting someone's path to wholeness by absorbing their shadow for them. And still, it's hard to walk away. Because the emotional caretaker fears one thing above all: abandonment. Not being abandoned, but abandoning. The guilt is crushing. What if they fall apart? What if no one else understands them like you do? These thoughts aren't just self-doubt. They're the residue of trauma bonds. You've been conditioned to believe that your value lies in your sacrifice. But here's the truth. Healthy love doesn't require you to disappear. And real healing can't happen while you're shielding someone from their own truth. The only way out of this trap is through clarity and the courage to reclaim your own boundaries. So how do you begin? With honesty. Not with them, with yourself. Ask, what do I get from being the savior? Who would I be if I wasn't fixing this? Am I helping or avoiding my own pain through theirs? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also liberating. Because once you see the pattern, you can stop playing the role. And as scary as it feels to step back, it's often the most loving act you can offer, to both of you. Next, we'll explore why the unconscious manipulator resists this healing, why they avoid confrontation with their own shadow, and how you, despite your best efforts, may be shielding them from the very transformation they need. There's a reason the unconscious manipulator never seems to change, no matter how much love, advice, or support you offer. It's not because they don't want healing. It's because healing requires confrontation, and confrontation threatens the very identity they've built. Carl Jung said that the greatest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of the parent. But what happens when that child grows up and becomes the adult who now offloads their own unlived pain onto others? They don't see it as harm. They see it as safety. And anyone who challenges that safety, anyone who breaks the emotional script, becomes a threat, not a helper. Most people think healing is about awareness. It's not. Awareness is just the doorway. Real transformation happens when someone is willing to sit in the fire of their own discomfort, without running, blaming, or offloading. But the unconscious manipulator avoids that fire at all costs. Their pain is so deeply buried it's fused with their personality. To touch it would be to unravel everything. So they develop shields: denial, charm, silence, guilt. They become masters of unspoken pressure. A look, a tone, a withdrawal. And suddenly, you're the one rushing in, trying to restore balance. Not because they asked, but because your body sensed the shift. This is the invisible war. The battle between the part of them that wants connection and the part that fears exposure. They crave love, but only on their terms. Terms that don't require change. Terms that don't include accountability. That's why the most dangerous manipulators aren't loud. They're subtle. They weaponize vulnerability. They bleed just enough to keep you nearby, but never enough to clean the wound. And the deeper you go into their world, the more confused you become. You question your instincts. You doubt your worth. You start believing that maybe you are the unstable one. But what's really happening is energetic inversion. Their shadow is living in your nervous system. In spiritual language, this is called energetic transference. In Jungian terms, it's projection. The parts of themselves they cannot accept, need, fear, rage, get cast onto you. And now you carry it. You react to it. You try to fix it. But nothing changes, because you're not dealing with them. You're dealing with a hologram, an echo of a trauma they refuse to name. And as long as they can outsource that shadow, they feel safe. But the price is high. Authentic connection becomes impossible, because no one is really with them. Everyone is just orbiting the wound they're trying to hide. Even worse, society often rewards this pattern. In families, they're called sensitive. In relationships, complicated. At work, misunderstood. No one sees the subtle manipulation because it doesn't look like aggression. It looks like sadness. But sadness without responsibility becomes a shield. And this is where the healing process breaks down, because they receive compassion but reject introspection. They demand presence but avoid transparency. They ask for love but cannot return it cleanly. And anyone who challenges this equation is accused of being cold, selfish, or unkind. But Jung would call this a shadow defense, a psyche that would rather fracture than be fully seen. So what do you do when you realize you've been protecting someone from the very pain that could liberate them? You step back, not with cruelty, but with clarity. You let the emotional consequences land. You stop editing yourself. You stop absorbing their storms. You let silence be theirs to hold. Because sometimes, it's only when the buffer disappears that the truth begins to echo. Jung believed that real growth often starts with collapse, the breakdown of the false self. But collapse can't happen if someone else keeps holding the pieces together, and every time you rescue them, you reinforce the very system that keeps them stuck. It's important to know, this is not abandonment, it's respect. You are not their savior. You are not their emotional regulator. You are not the architect of their healing. That is their work. Your job is to protect your energy, your mind, your clarity. You've already given enough. And still, it wasn't enough. Not because you failed, but because healing can't be borrowed. It has to be owned. And until they are willing to stop outsourcing their shadow, no amount of empathy will make them whole. What they need is solitude. What they fear is reflection. And what they resist is exactly where the healing waits. So here's the invitation. Return to yourself. Exit their storm. Let the silence speak. Because the next step is no longer about them. It's about you. What made you stay this long? What story are you reenacting through their pain? In the next chapter, we'll shift the focus from their shadow to your soul. You've carried too much for too long. It's time to ask the harder question. Why did you feel responsible for saving someone who was never trying to be free? Now that you've seen the pattern, the question is, will you keep playing the role? Because this isn't just about them. It's about you, your nervous system, your energy, your future. You've been taught that love means sacrifice, that helping means staying, that leaving means failure. But what if real love means letting go? What if the most compassionate act is to stop carrying what was never yours? Take a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself, who drains your energy without ever asking for it? Where do you feel the need to shrink so someone else feels stable? What part of you still believes you're only valuable when you're useful? You don't need to rescue anyone to prove your worth. You don't need to stay in cycles of emotional exhaustion to earn love. You are not their healer, their parent, or their shadow container. You are a full human being, deserving of mutual care, clear boundaries, and inner peace. So start small. Reclaim your silence. Speak your truth. Walk away when your soul whispers, "This isn't safe." You'll feel guilt at first. But over time, that guilt will turn into clarity, and that clarity into freedom. If this video spoke to you, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. There's more coming: tools, truths, and transformation for people like you. The ones who feel deeply, but are finally learning to feel wisely. You're not alone anymore. Let's walk this path together.